now on to the good stuff. The reason that you're here is star of the show, of course, is Andrew Younger. So Andrew is the director, writer, and host of the Walkabout show. From hill walking in Cape Breton to the rocky trails of the South Shore. The show takes you on Nova Scotia's unique trails, profiling the natural beauty to be found on each one. Episodes from 4 seasons are now available on YouTube, which is awesome. So I'm starting to work my way through those. But those of you who already have access to Eastlink, you've probably been watching for the last 4 or 5 years. Season 5 is now on, and there's going to be a season 6. Yeah. Yes. So in 1999, after Andrew spent a year working with CBC Television News, he moved to Whale Song Productions into television documentary production and electronic news gathering. The business grew quickly, and it provided content for major Canadian, US, and European broadcasters on the television side, as well as photography and written content for magazines and newspapers. So Andrew and Whale Song Productions have won awards for their work and developed a stable slate of clients on almost every continent and delivers projects in environments ranging from seabound tall ships to sub-Saharan desert to northern Canada and under the ocean. And of course, then there's Walkabout. So we're going to hear all about his adventures and misadventures, I'm sure, in making Walkabout. So take it away. Thanks.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. Winter is the last time I want to leave my house. It's nice and warm there. So I really do appreciate everybody coming out and to talk about this. As Janet said, we are now about to start filming season 6 of Walkabout, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. There are 4 seasons now on YouTube, and the other 5 air across Canada on various Eastlink stations, and you can get them on demand. So I was recently in Vancouver and people were talking to me about it there. And now that it's actually on YouTube, I was mentioning to one of the staff here earlier that I was at a television conference in Los Angeles recently, and it was brought up to me that some people there who were looking for a trip to Nova Scotia had found it on YouTube. So it is amazing, the reach. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about how the show came to be, how it's changed from, if you watch season 1 looks very different than season 5 does, and there are reasons for that. And I'm going to talk about more behind the scenes, the stuff you don't necessarily get to see, and how we put it together, and some of the challenges we face, and some of the things that make it difficult, because we get a lot of mail, which always surprises me. It's great. And people suggesting certain places to go hiking, and some of them we want to do them all. Some of them we cannot do, or we will do at some point, but we haven't figured out logistically how to do. And I'll talk about one of those that we are going to try and conquer this year that has been a challenge for us for a number of reasons. But I will start, for those of you who have not necessarily seen the show, this is the opening for this season. So if you watch the show, you're familiar with that opening and you know all about it. I was first approached by a company called Winter Light Productions, asked whether I'd be interested in hiking a show that involved going off to cafes in the province and maybe going and doing a little trail in the neighborhood and filming it all with a GoPro myself. And it was going to be called High Road, Low Road, and it was High Low Productions was going to be the name of that first company. And I said, I don't know, just give it to me, let me do my own thing. And so if you watch season 1, I did make it about trails. It was just me and a camera person, so it wasn't just with a GoPro, but there was just 2 of us doing all the trails that we did. But we did stop at a cafe in every single episode because that was part of their original pitch to the broadcasters. So you see me eating ice cream at Cape Split, and you see, and it just and then it became a bakery, and then something else. And one of the best things that could ever happen was a pandemic, because all the bakeries and things closed, which meant we could drop that part of the show, which never really totally made sense. The other thing that is different in season 1 is you'll see me on a bike sometimes. And I do like cycling, and it was a way to look at trails in a different way. So we did the Rum Runners Trail, and I cycled it from Mahone Bay to Halifax. And that was great. It was a great way to do it, but it sort of, over time, it felt like it didn't quite fit. We did Kepik Mountain, and we did the trail there, hiking it, and then did the mountain bike trails that came down the mountain. Those are really important, but it seemed like a different kind of show to us. And when we talked to people, what they were really interested in was the history of the areas and so forth, and the ecology, or some of the indigenous history. For example, when we did Fitzpatrick Mountain, a lot of people were unaware of the major battles that happened between indigenous tribes in that area. As Janet mentioned, there are a lot of trails that were traditional hiking routes for the Mi'kmaq over time, and we've done some of that. And so it has evolved over time to be more about the trails. And the concept, listen, I am not the best hiker in the world. That's my shirt says. I am not the smartest person out there. I don't know all the stuff that's out there. But the show is really intended to say, listen, anybody can go and do this. You don't have to be completely ripped. You don't have to be perfectly fit and get out there. And we try to then have a mix of trails that are difficult, right? We did Pollett's Cove in season 1. That was hard. We didn't walk for a while after doing that one. But we also have done Shuby Park, for example. We did Long Lake Park. And so that people can see that there's all different options. And we've done some trails that are accessible trails where you could take a wheelchair, or you could take a stroller. And I think that sort of stuff is very important, just to show there's options for everybody. So now we started, as I said, with just 2 of us out on the trail. That was extremely difficult. And one of the things we learned when we were at Pollett's Cove and realized there was no cell service, and we went out at dawn, before dawn. We did it in the fall. So we went out before dawn, filmed all the way one way, and then you have to turn around and come back. And we got back after dark. And it occurred to us that maybe we should have a satellite communicator after that. So there's been a lot of things that have changed. We have that. We have extra crew now. There's always at least 3 of us now. So if somebody could stay with somebody could get help. There's often up to 5 people out there. But it actually takes 30 people to put this show together. And that's what a lot of people don't necessarily see. There are the accountants. There are all these people that we have people that help us with the research. Some people are just come out and say, listen, I will go out and flag that trail. It's a real rough trail, but I know it. My family has done this trail all the time. It's a little bit wrong, but we'll just go flag it for you, and they'll go do that in advance. And those kind of things happen. And it's become a very community show in that way. If you've watched the show, we almost never have guests. There are actually only 2 episodes that have guests, and there are reasons for it. One was a forest bathing episode we did at Trout Point. It's a small 8-minute segment at the end of, actually we're talking about seeing the Billy's Hill one. It's the end of the Billy's Hill episode. We do forest bathing, and that was a way to show people that there's different ways to connect with the trails and nature and see them in different ways. And so that was guided. And the other one, which you'll see a bit of later, is George Fraser Slot Canyon. And we chose to take a guide there because of safety issues. And we knew we could do it because there was enough of us. But we didn't want to encourage other people to do it unless they went with a guide, because there is some climbing involved and harnesses. Not that it's difficult. I mean, anybody could do the climbing if they're there with someone to show them how to do it. But we don't want to encourage people to do things that aren't safe. And so we do that where we can. But for the most part, it is just me. Let me show you the promo that we did for this season. It isn't too often that I get to end my hike behind a waterfall. Rum running in Nova Scotia was big business. Shipyards up and down the coast repaired and built rum runners. And it was, for the most part, a legal business. Problems didn't arise until we cross the border into the United States. We try to have a big mix of trails. This is Gibraltar Rock. This is actually a screenshot from the episode on Gibraltar Rock. We try to choose ones based on wildlife that we might see. We don't always see wildlife. Sometimes we don't plan to see it, and we don't. We pick them, obviously everybody wants to see waterfalls, so there's always waterfall episodes. We try to have a mix of history in what we're choosing. There is a lot of history in this province. Sometimes it amazes me. We did a ghost town in season 1 or 2, the Roxbury ghost town, which is the last remaining ghost town that actually has buildings in Nova Scotia. That's an incredible place. This is at the end of Money Point, this particular spot. And we try to choose these places so that you get to see different parts, so that we get to see different parts of the province, and we try to go end to end. So we have now been, Money Point, which is pretty much the northernmost point in Nova Scotia, and we did Seal Island last season. So it's tough to get much further south than that. This year we did Cape Sable, which is the southernmost point of mainland in Nova Scotia. It can look Caribbean. It didn't this year, as you'll see later. And then we look at, one of the things we start to look at is themes. So in season 1, we sort of went, okay, we're going to just, in an area where here's the long trail, here's the short trail, let's put them together. And it made sense, right? Because we were going to the cafes. So it'd be like, I would be standing at an ice cream place going, well, just down the road is, it worked, but it was a little hokey, right? When you go back and watch that, you'll see the difference. But it became, maybe we could do this thematically. So, for example, there might be one on industrial history, and there might be all kinds of other history to tell there, but we'll focus on the industrial history and the trail. We obviously need something that looks really visual. We now go out with 3 Canon for anybody who's into the technical side, we go out with 3 Canon cameras, a complete professional audio kit, and at least 1 drone, sometimes 2 or 3 drones. So there is a lot, and sometimes, very occasionally, we use helicopters for some of the footage. You'll see a couple shots later that are from a helicopter, but that's a lot of equipment. So one of the other things that goes into choosing what trails we're going to do is how we are actually going to carry all of that equipment and all the battery stuff we need from the start of the trail to the end of the trail. And Money Point was actually one of our more difficult ones because it ended up being 30 degrees. And does everybody know where Money Point? Okay, so Money Point is in Bay St. Lawrence, well, very close to Bay St. Lawrence, Cape North. Very, very northern Cape Breton. There used to be a lighthouse at the very end, and there was a road. The road is the trail now. And what would happen is that lighthouse would get served twice a year by boat. And so the people that grew up there was a foghorn operator, and there was a lighthouse keeper, and they had a family and kids. They ran a little school for the kids, and they would only see people twice a year. Then eventually they built them first of all, the lighthouse was run by oil, and then they brought electricity, which brought a road. But the road didn't work very well because it's so steep. You're going up that mountain, and you can imagine what cars were like back then. They didn't like this. There is a shipwreck.
Named after the shipwreck?
I don't know if it's named after that shipwreck. There are 2 shipwrecks off that coast, but neither one of them are that I know of are at that one. There is another famous shipwreck just off of Meat Cove, which is very close by, that was pillaged and so forth. And unfortunately, I don't. Well, actually, it's a good place for this anecdote. I get asked a lot. I run into people on the trails who watch the show, and I often get asked, "Oh, do you just make it up as you go along?" I am not that smart. I don't. You will see examples later where we have to obviously adjust, but we spend the winter doing the research for the most part, in the archives, finding out the history of the different areas, and then we figure out how we're going to make a story out of that. Like, what is the main storytelling? Obviously, here was the lighthouse. Somewhere else, Fitzpatrick Mountain, I mentioned it was the Mi'kmaq battles. We found out about these battles. Like, oh, okay, we can mention the wind turbines here, that's great, but the battle is the story. Gulliver's Cove, which is in Digby, if you haven't been there, it's a nice hike, is named after the pirate Gulliver. And so that was Cutthroat Gulliver, who was legend had stored his gold in the cliffs there. So that became the story we told there. So we go out with a script that's totally written. And as you'll see later, sometimes we have to change it because we don't find what we're looking for, or the weather is different, and we will get to that. There are 130 trails that we've done so far. You will have heard of all these or most of these. One of the things the other thing I get asked all the time is, what's your favorite trail? That is an impossible question to answer because every trail has different things that are really neat. Like Pollett's Cove was neat because we conquered it 2 people in and out one day. I mean, that was, to us, we're like, oh, boy, pat on the back for that one. The camera guy at the time wasn't sure he was going to get out of there. So we did, Seal Island was amazing, and we ran into some locals who lived there, and they were really kind and started showing us around. Sometimes we find unexpected things, like in Guysborough, we did the Trans-Canada Trail that they've done a lot of work building. And what was really interesting about that is we ended up finding a small house that some people had lived in. The house was only about this tall, but had lived in as they were draft dodgers from the Vietnam War, and they raised 2 children in a house that was not bigger than this and not taller than this. And now the trail goes right by it, and the municipality's actually protected that building because of its heritage importance. Oh, this was this summer. We were in the Kedgie Seaside Adjunct. Yep. And there's signs, bears. We kept on, have anybody seen bears? No, we haven't seen bears in months. And then we walked the trail and there's a bear staring at us. I mean, it was great. And he was interested in us. We watched him for a bit and then he moved on. But that was really cool, because everybody talks about bears in Kedgie. So if you watch that episode, we obviously talked about that. And then, you can see how close we are to the city there. There's some amazing places that are right here in the city. We find a lot of stuff like this. Wildlife is, this is just a duck, but it's cool. Like, we sit there and we can watch them for hours. This is in Sackville Lakes Park. So if you want a really easy hike, Sackville Lakes Provincial Park, and apparently those pileated woodpeckers hang out there all summer, and you just sit there and you're almost guaranteed to see them. I'm by training, everybody thinks I'm a journalist by training because that was actually my second degree, but I'm a marine biologist originally. And so to me, the wildlife is always really fascinating to me. And somebody, if you're missing your shoe, that is in George Fraser Slot Canyon. So who knows? Yeah, there's got to be a story, and that's why I took that photo, because I was like, there's a story with that shoe. Like, something happened here. But it's amazing, and one of the things I've been fortunate that when I grew up, my family lived in the UK, so I've hiked all through the UK, and I didn't think about it as hiking then. Like, if you had asked me, do you hike, I would have said no, but we did, right? And my brother and I played in the woods in Dartmouth, and we'd travel, or if we went to the Caribbean or something, you'd hike the mountains, and without thinking it was mountains, it was like, oh, we're going to go visit the park. Okay, we're going to go visit the park. I grew up playing in Shoeby Park. Again, trails, right? And it amazes me the different geology and environment you can find all over this province. Like, there are places that look like they belong elsewhere in the world. And as I said, it's hard to pick a favorite trail, but Sable Island is probably our best experience. So I think anybody that's been to Sable Island, and we're actually looking at going there this winter, will tell you that that is one of the most amazing places on earth. It, it, it was very challenging to film there. Parks Canada was great. They don't allow people to stay overnight there. They let us stay overnight for a couple of days. We had sand and absolutely everything. And I promised some behind the scenes stuff, and this is a good example of where we run into trouble. We try to do every trail or hiking destination in one day. And there's a reason for that. One, I need to be wearing the same clothes unless we say it's a different day. Now, secret, I actually bring multiples of my shirts in my backpack, so when it's 30 degrees, I can change the shirt and look the same. I do actually sweat, so it's not. Don't watch the episode and go, "It's 30 degrees. Wow, how did he not sweat?" I do. But one of the other things is weather, and we first found this when we did the Rum Runners Trail. We had to stop because it was dark. It's a beautiful day, and we did it on a bike. But we'll come back tomorrow. We'll finish it. It was still sunny. It was great, but it was very, very cold. And I had to wear the same things, a short sleeve shirt, and I'm on my bike, and I'm freezing through it. And the same thing happened on Sable Island. We were there just before the hurricane came through a couple of years ago. And in fact, the flight after us leaving the island took the staff off the island. First day was great. We're like, okay, we're going to film this with Andrew in a t-shirt. Oh, there now. And because it's sunny, it's like 25 degrees, it's beautiful. It was like being on a Caribbean. I mean, you saw the picture. It's like being on a Caribbean. If it was anywhere else in the world, it would be covered in resorts. The next day, it was really, really, really cold. And so we were filming it, and then I was running back to an ATV that Parks Canada wanted to make sure follow us around, so it's fine. And they were very helpful, but they would have an ATV to lug our gear. And one of the things that happened was I had a jacket there, and I had to keep going, put the jacket on, get warm, get warm, get warm. And that is one of the things that you do not see in the show that is kind of, people say, well, why do you need to film it in one day? And it's because it becomes really difficult to chase weather. We need the weather to look the same. We need the sun in the same place, because otherwise it's going to look strange. You're going to think there's something wrong with the episode. You're not going to necessarily know what. The Sable Island ones are on YouTube now, so that was 2 seasons ago, so you can watch those if you don't have Eastlink. There are 2 episodes. One of them is on the history of Sable Island, and there's a lot of history I think people don't know. There were complete settlements out there. There are more people living out there today than most people realize. It is not just one person. There's a whole community there of almost like you think the oil sands, the people that sort of transfer back and forth. Parks Canada has staff that go in and out for a couple months at a time. Every summer, Parks Canada actually has a posting for people if they want to have a job to live out there for the summer and work there. It's honestly, I think it sounds like a great job. I mean, it can be lonely, but there's a lot of stuff going on. It is one of the emergency landing places for helicopters when they were going offshore and so forth. So they store fuel for like aviation fuel and stuff out there, and for search and rescue. So the search and rescue helicopters land there to refuel and so forth. So there is also a community at the far end of the island, which is fisheries and oceans. So there's actually more people out there at any given time than you might think. Lots of researchers who come and go. So when you hear there's only one person that lives out there, it's one person who lives out there year round, and actually that's their address. But it is a beautiful and amazing place. This is not Sable Island. This is Port Bickerton Lighthouse. Some beautiful trails there if you haven't been there. I put this up as another example. It was pouring with rain this day, and we were filming, because I can't look like I'm soaking wet because it wouldn't work for the show. We were in it. That's why Paul, our director of photography, is all covered in like the rain gear, and we were doing it in between rain showers. So we would suddenly run under an umbrella, whatever, so that I didn't get wet, but we could move along the trail because we had already got there. And sometimes, like Port Bickerton's is a decent drive, and the weather said it was going to clear up. One of the things, we pay for a special weather forecast that gives us more specific location-based stuff, much like what they do for offshore operations. It's not always right, and it's not very good at predicting fog and stuff. So that is just one of the challenges that we run into. So fog. This was Cape Sable this summer. Now, I have been to Cape... Does everybody know where Cape Sable is? All right, so near Yarmouth, no, Barrington, really. It's an absolutely beautiful place. I have been there many, many, many times. So I've been there for sheep herding, for a show I do on dogs, or did do on dogs. And every time I went, it was beautiful. We left with sunburns all the time. And we're like, this will be fine, this will be fine, this is going to be great. We're going to go and do an episode. We have to hike this island because it's just such a beautiful place to go, and it's so easy to get to from the mainland. There's a guy that will take you for $20 in his dory over. You just call him, he takes you over, and then you call him when you want to be picked up. Cell phones work, so you just call him when you're ready to leave, and people go all the time. This is going to be amazing. We waited a few days. We had done a loop around Southwest. Okay, we'll skip. We'll go tomorrow. It just came down to the point. The forecast said the fog was going to disappear by 10 o'clock in the morning. And I said, this is great because we can go over in the fog. It'll be all mysterious. And it didn't. These are the sheep out there, but it stayed foggy the whole time. And I talked earlier how the script is written in advance, but sometimes you have to adjust. This was an example because the whole script was written, oh, look, there's the lighthouse. You can see it in the distance, 5 kilometers. We didn't see the lighthouse till we were next to it. Which makes me question how well that light works for people offshore. So we had to adjust. It's always nice to hike on a sunny day, but the fog here, well, this really helps explain why a lighthouse was so important here. By the time one opened, more lives had been lost off Cape Sable than anywhere else in Nova Scotia. I'm going to show you some pictures of what this place looks like when it's sunny, just so you get an idea of how different it looks. But on November 12th, 1861, that first lighthouse opened, and the lighthouse keeper was John Harvey Doane. The 65-foot tower had red lights rather than white, despite a white light being recommended. It took 19 lamps to shine through the red glazing in the glass, but the color was hard to see beyond a few miles from shore. By 1869, the full red light was abandoned and instead was changed to a sort of red and white striping. This greatly improved visibility. Ever in search of improvements, 1 year later it was changed again to a flashing white light. There would be a number of improvements here over the years. In 1876, they installed a fog alarm system here. You can probably hear the more modern one in the distance now. In 1897, they put a lifeboat here. Now, that was a little weird because it had no crew, just the coxswain who was also the lighthouse keeper. 3 years later, they would move that lifeboat to Clark's Harbor on Cape Sable Island, where there were actually people who could man it. There would be no significant changes to the light itself until 1902, over 30 years later, when they would install a white Fresnel glass lens. That happened to be the same year that up in Cape Breton, a young Italian by the name of Marconi was sending his first wireless transmission across the ocean. With that first communication from Glace Bay to England on December 15th, 1902, a new age of communication began. You just adjust, right? I mean, you have no choice. So it is partially ad-libbed, it is mostly scripted. Obviously, I did not go out knowing all those dates and so forth. And the other part I will tell you is that took many takes. That last part. There was probably 6 times I walked down there because I would get a date wrong or this. So that brings the next thing. This is the crew and how we film some of this stuff. It takes us about an hour per kilometer on average to film a trail. There are lots of friends of mine who say they would absolutely love to come with us. Can we come and can we help out? I'm like, sure. And then I explained to them what's involved, and almost everybody bails. We have had people come with us who did bail after and never came back and did another one because it is long. we have an amazing director of photography who joined us halfway through season 2. You saw him earlier there, Paul Morris. He's in Vancouver tonight, otherwise he would be here as well. He is very methodical, and it's a little bit slow sometimes, but that's why we get the pictures we do. So you can imagine that we do a 5-kilometer trail. It takes us about 5 hours to do that, where I could go walk that in an hour. It is a test of patience. It also means that things change. We did Castle Rock one time. Does everybody know where Castle Rock is? It's down on the South Shore, not too far from Chester. A beautiful hike. We left. It was really sunny. Like, this is gonna be great, amazing. The script is all written about the view you see and all the different places. Got to the top, the fog had moved in because it had been so long that it took us to get there. It is one of our challenges when we look at larger hikes is, how do we do this? And so we have to manage that. And I'm going to talk about one a bit later, but this is in George Fraser Slot Canyon. And I want to give you an example of how long it takes to do stuff. I said we run drones sometimes. So there are 4 of us who are pilots, drone pilots now, certified drone pilots. So sometimes I'm in it, sometimes I'm not in the shot, sometimes I'm flying it. And we wanted a very specific shot once we got to the George Fraser Slot Canyon. Has anybody here been to that canyon?
What county is it in?
It is in Cumberland County. It is an amazing hike. It's not long. It's a little difficult because you go first down a trail, down a canyon, and you walk along a river. So you can't go like after it's been really a lot of rain, or you wouldn't want to go in spring because you'd basically be walking in knee-high water. And then you get to the end, well, not the end, but you get to the spot where there's ropes, and somebody's put ropes. You'll see a photo later. And that's why I'm wearing a harness. You connect to the harness, you go up, and then you drop down into this canyon where there's a beautiful, beautiful waterfall. We spent 2 hours. Fortunately, we have a behind the scenes of us doing the drone. I'm going to show you the final result shortly. But you can see one of the things, we have actually lost drones in waterfalls because drones hate this environment because there's no GPS with the rocks. So you have to be very, very careful flying in and out. So we spent 2 hours just in the canyon up here getting all the shots we wanted to get this.
Holy moly. So you can see here why the type of rock matters for a slot canyon. As the water comes through, it erodes the softer rock and avoids the harder rock. And so you get these undulations. And so the shape of this canyon, you can see it comes in on the sides, it's wider in spots, is because of that slow process of chewing away at the soft rock.
So that is, I don't know, that is like 30 seconds or something at the end. It took us 2 hours to get that. But that's just to give you an idea of like some of the, when you watch that shot, that's how that was done. It just happens to be one that I had a behind the scenes of flying that drone slowly through and doing it again. In TV, we call it a dolly shot. So if you ever hear, and they often do it on rails. So they'll set up, obviously we're not going to carry rails around with us and roll things. It doesn't work that well for this kind of show. That is an example of the kind of challenge we do run into. This is Money Point, where another place where we just put together multiple shots.
Since a new lighthouse was also being planned anyhow, they included a double dwelling, one for a lighthouse keeper and their family, and one for an engineer and his family to operate the fog alarm. The families established a small farm here, which would provide fresh produce. They also built a school for the children. The school was taught by the parents of the children because, of course, no one else came here except the twice annual supply ships. Beyond that, you were on your own. It would have been a lonely life, but in keeping with the history of life in Cape North generally during the early 1900s. So for most of the time there was a lighthouse here, there was no electricity. The lighthouse keeper had to get up every 4 hours, wind the clockwork mechanism just so the light would be sure to flash every 5 seconds. There was no road here either until much, much later on. And when they did build a road, they were kind enough to give the lighthouse keeper and his family a Jeep. And that Jeep could take them to Bay St. Lawrence for medical emergencies in theory. But more often than not, they had trouble using it, because what would happen is when they went up that hill that I came down, the engine oil would run to the back of the engine and the vehicle would seize. That hill isn't just tough today, it was tough then too. Commercial electricity wasn't extended to this station until 1973. At the same time, perhaps to facilitate the arrival of electrical poles and installation, the road, such as it was upgraded, though the effect of those upgrades have clearly long passed.
That's Money Point. We were talking about it a bit earlier, and it is a great hike, but you need to be prepared. One of the things that we have started doing is working to get further and further out and do more and more challenging hikes. We've started involving some transportation companies. So we did Seal Island, and the only way we could do it in enough time was to go by helicopter. And so now you can take a boat, and if you were doing it yourself, you'd go by boat, but we would lose 5 hours round trip on the boat, and we can't do that. We need to get from point A to point B. Obviously, we don't have a budget to go everywhere by helicopter, otherwise, that would be really great. We also now, in Cape Breton especially, we use a company called TNT Adventures, who run snowmobiles and ATVs. And we're going to talk about North River Falls shortly. And there was an example, there was no way we were ever going to be able to do North River Falls unless somebody pulled us out at the end because of the distance. We run into a lot of stuff that we don't expect. I don't know if you're familiar with a place called Goldbrook in Cape Breton. It is a mining area, as you would imagine, Goldbrook. It was a lot of gold mining. We were convinced, we had the whole script, we were doing the whole thing all the way up. We couldn't find the mine. And then eventually we did. And we got to a river where the trail had been washed out, and I saw bricks in the river, and the bricks had the name of the company in it. And I said, well, we have to be close. And then we went around the river. The trail had washed out, is what had happened. And there were rail lines going through the woods. And there were the old buildings in the mine, and then you could actually go right into the gold mine there. We chose not to go down the mine that far, obviously for safety reasons, but also it seemed to be a lot of water coming in from above, and we just weren't sure what the condition of the mine was. But apparently all the engines and so forth are still down there. And it was a big gold mining area. But we run into a lot of that stuff where we're like, we're going to get out here. I'm not sure we're going to find something. And then we just have to figure it out. We have only dropped or canceled a hike a few times. There's one, and if anybody knows where this spot is and has information, I would love to know, because we still want to do it. Out near the current HRM landfill, there is a cemetery. And you can hike in off the highway, and we did. We hiked in. We had GPS coordinates for the cemetery and stood right there, and we could not find the cemetery stones. We have that entire episode filmed, except for the end, because we'll have to refilm it because I've gained weight, so we'd have to do it again. But I mean, either way, we know the rest of it. We know the history, but we had no ending because we're here. Well, we know the buildings were here, so fine. We figured the buildings are gone. Somebody had given us GPS coordinates for those headstones and said, no, you can still see them, but we never found them. So of course we run into situations like that. There is if you're familiar with the trail behind Indian Lake Golf Course, it runs, it's the old St. Margaret's Bay Road. I think people have different names for it. I mean, it really is the old St. Margaret's Bay Road all the way from Pathlong Lake Park. Yeah, and you can go all the way to, can't go as far as Peggy's Cove, but you can go quite a long ways. We had planned to do that, and it had been so much rain that it just washed out. So this was Pollett's Cove coming back in the dark, and we ran into a moose on the trail. Great photo, a little bit scary at the time, but very friendly, We have not yet run into a coyote, so there you go. I mean, we've run into all kinds of other animals, and we hear all kinds of animals. We were stalked by something on one trail, and people laugh at me, but the cameraman at the time and I are convinced we were stalked on Franey Mountain because we could just, there was a smell of an animal that kept following us all the way up the trail, and we kept hearing it now and again, but it never came out, so I don't know what it was. It may have been a moose. So North River Falls. Has anybody been to North River? All right, so North River Falls. It is the tallest waterfall in the Maritimes. It is in Cape Breton. It is stunning. We were going to do it in season 1. No, it got washed out. The trail got washed out. Too dangerous. Don't go. Season 2. No, still washed out. Hasn't been fixed. Season 3 hasn't been washed out. Still washed out. Department of Natural Resources says to me, "It's fixed. The trail's gone. We fixed it. It's good. You can go. You can get out there now." Great. This is amazing. But we knew, because it's about an 11-kilometer hike. We knew we could not do 11 kilometers and get out in the same day because we wouldn't get back because of our filming. So this was taken the day before. We took the ATVs in up a logging road to see if there was a way to get in a short way. And there's a trail that goes from the logging road right down. So we're great. You guys can pick us up. We have satellite communicators now. We learned from season 1. You can pick us up here. DNR didn't entirely give us the accurate information. They had fixed the first half of the trail. It became a little sketchier after that.
This area sits in an eco-district called the Cape Breton Hills, and it borders another eco-district called the Cape Breton Highlands, which if I went beyond the falls, I would actually reach. Now, eco-districts are not like properties. They don't have distinct boundaries. They don't have survey.
Everybody has that reaction, but I always put it when I fall, it goes in, because it just, otherwise it can happen anyway.
It's found in a certain area. The Cape Breton Hills Eco District is also not a designation of land ownership or use. In 2007, 50% of the land in the Cape Breton Hills was privately held. 35% was provincially owned, and the rest held by either the federal government or
This is the DNR Groom Trail.
community organizations. So what's happened over the past few years along the North River Trail is this cliff has been eroded away, and the trail, which was well out there, is now gone. Then you can see there's places another trail was constructed and then trees have fallen over. And so there are now sections of this trail which are very technical in nature. And you want things like hiking poles and sometimes even ropes. Coming out on this hike, I knew that there would be stream crossings, so I did pack some water shoes, but I honestly didn't expect it to be quite this bad. And as I said before, it can be really variable. And this upper trail at North River Falls has changed substantially. So if you're gonna do it, really come prepared. Fortunately, our director of photography suggested we bring a rope. And I laughed at the time, but the rope is now being used, so the crew is holding it, and we've been slowly getting the camera equipment across to the other side. I hear North River Falls is worth it when you get to the end. I hear it's quite lovely, so. And this is Morgan, our first camera assistant, and they are very strong, and I'm very thankful for that.
As I say, you have to ad-lib sometimes. The trail was supposed to go all the way. There were supposed to be some like ankle-deep water crossings in a couple spots. It is not. Was it like that when you went to?
I don't think it was that bad.
Yeah. How long ago were you there?
It was 2021 in October.
Okay, yeah, it has since the problem in North River Falls, the trail's fine about halfway up, and I would say go up halfway, see the river, come back. Don't continue on. It's an amazing waterfall, but there are better ways to get in to see it. And if you just go to the river, you can see all kinds of butterflies there. So it is actually still worth doing it. But what's happened is the trail got washed out, the trees came down, and now every spring with that runoff, it's just that canyon is getting wider and wider and wider and wider. And you can see, I mean, it gets pretty deep there. My director of photography, who was terrified by the end of that hike, he was traumatized by the end of this because we were scaling. There's parts we didn't film because we're scaling the edge of a cliff wall in the canyon. And he said, you made that look really easy in that episode. So you can imagine it's a lot worse. But at the end, I do say, listen, this is not what we expected it to be. But it's a great spot to go. If you ever go to that one, go in either from the top or go in from the bottom. There are other things that have happened. This was in the same episode. I am stuck on the rope. What happened was we were filming this way, and I got there's carabiners on my backpack, and it sounds like a great idea, doesn't it? Like, oh, we're going to put ropes to help people along. The ropes are too high, so when you go like this, if you have carabiners on the backpack, it clipped into the rope, and I was stuck on the rope. So that stuff happens. Theodore Fricker Mountain. In Cape Breton. I seem to have more Cape Breton than I thought. This is me there.
Wow.
Is that also Tenerife?
Yes, it was called Tenerife.
Tenerife.
And now the official name is Theodore Fricker. There are a number of reasons for that. Anybody know why it was called Tenerife? So allegedly, I don't know, I see it, but allegedly when you look this way, this looks like Tenerife. Apparently. Anyway, so now it's called Theodore Fricker because Theodore Fricker was lobbied by the community to change the name, and it is now the official name of that mountain. And he was a gentleman who lived in the area who did a lot of the clearing for the trails going up the mountains. My crew also likes to not tell me when I'm about to get into trouble because they think it'll be really funny on camera. So, for example, that was on Sable Island. And you can hear me swear there, but the audio didn't pick up soon enough. So there you go. That didn't make that because that was an outtake, but they love doing that all the time. This is Garlock Falls. I mean, one of the beautiful things, and just to sort of finish up here, is we get to see a lot of really beautiful places. We get to see places, especially with the drone, in views you don't otherwise see. Because we take an hour to do a kilometer, we see a lot of stuff other people miss. Like we'll go along a trail and we'll suddenly see like just stuff that, like small animals or plants. We see rare plants that people just walking the trail miss. So there are benefits. And we have seen parts of this province that you would just not otherwise ever go and see. There is a lot of variety here. There are a lot of options. There are tons of options. And so looking forward, we are obviously going into season 6 now. If you're familiar with Seawall, we've been trying to do that for a number of years, trying to figure out how to carry all the battery equipment, because it's not just the gear, we have to carry the food, the batteries, because that is a 4 or 5, probably 6 days for us to film that. And it really isn't a camping show, right? It's a day hike show, right? So we're looking at that. We have done, as you saw here in a photo a second ago, the Tantalum wildfires. We went up through there and did the trails after the fires were over to look at the regeneration of that area and how the plant life and the animals were coming back. So we have also tried to do some of that sort of stuff just so that people can understand the environment around them. This is about history, but it's also about environment. It's about understanding the community. It's about our history. It's a whole lot of things packaged into one place. We get to sit in a lot of places for a long time. This is on Briar Island, at the lighthouse at the end. That's what makes this great. And the other thing that makes it great is it's become really a crowdsourced project where people send us trail ideas and we go, well, that sounds like a great idea. And then, or we learn about the history of an area from somebody. We did one this year called the Otter Marsh Cliffs, which are in Bootlear's Point. And I went to do it as this is a climbing destination. We'll go up to the rock, show where people climb, and that'll be lovely. But I met with some locals and they told me all about like hauling logs through there, and there used to be a sawmill up at the river and all that sort of thing. Oh, and one guy who put car batteries and lights on the end of a sled because you could only bring the logs out in at night because it would get too warm. You had to do it in the winter, right? So it would get wet and soggy. So you had to do it on the ice, but then they couldn't see, so they had the lights. Those are the kind of stories we hear. When we did Money Point, I mentioned Money Point a few times, we stayed in what I believe is the only hotel in Bay St. Lawrence, a lovely inn. And the owner there said, well, what are you doing here? And we said, well, we're filming this lighthouse. She said, oh, I got married in that lighthouse. And we were the last people to live there. And she said, I said, that must have been really lonely. She said, no, I really liked it. And then we went out to Seal Island and lived on Seal Island. I'm like, right. There is a certain type of person that is a lighthouse keeper or a lighthouse keeper's wife. Those are the kind of things that become really interesting. And as we get more and more seasons, and especially as it's on Eastlink and YouTube, people contact us constantly. We get a lot of mail, a lot of email, a lot of phone calls from people saying, did you know about this? I also get told all the things I said wrong in the show, which is fine. That's the last thing I want to just talk about is one of our biggest challenges is in doing the history of the show or the history of the trails or the translations or what happened. The further back you go in history, there are a lot of different variations, and we have to ultimately pick a version of the history. And we pick the one we think is probably most likely correct, but there's always somebody who says it's wrong. I get pronunciations wrong all the time. A friend of mine is Mi'kmaq and helps me with the Mi'kmaq pronunciations, but they're terrible. But it's the point of trying to do them and just trying to say this was the name and this is what the name meant. Those are the kind of things that I find really interesting, because invariably an episode will air and somebody will call and tell me, well, my great-grandfather, and I'll get the other side of the story. And sometimes I'll tell both sides if I know it. So as we go into season 6, we are at the moment planning the trails we might like to do. And I would encourage anybody to reach out to me, whether it's through the website or Instagram, whatever, call me. If you have trails you think would be great for us to do that you've done, we love hidden ones that people don't necessarily know as much. We've done a lot of the sort of the top 10 that everybody knows, but those are the kind of things we're looking for. Like Ottermarsh Cliffs, we wouldn't even known about unless somebody said, well, there is a trail back in Bootlayers Point that leaves from the back of the ball field, right? Humes River Falls, the province told us it does not exist. I have been on that trail. It is marked and it is roped. But it's the I think it's Wagmacook, but one of the local indigenous communities has actually cleared that trail, marked the trail. They put signs, there's ropes, the whole bit. But officially, there's no trail there. But the community has built the trail right to the waterfall. So those are the kind of things that are great to find, because then people can see them, and you might decide, oh, well, actually that one doesn't look too bad. We should go out and see that, or I might just go, that was great. I'm glad he did that and I didn't. So either's fine.